Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make my gluten-free chocolate cream pie. It's in my cookbook. Maybe you've made it already, but today I'm going to show you how to make it. And what this pie needs is a pre-baked pie crust. And there's also a recipe in my cookbook for that. And I also have a video of that here on my channel. I'll put a link for that below. But my pie crust is all ready. And it did shrink a little bit on one side, which happens, but I have it on a cooling rack because once we cook the filling, I like to put it on a cooling rack. I feel like it helps it cool down a little bit quicker to stick in the fridge. But you don't have to do that. And if you've made this the day before or something like that, and you take it right out of the fridge to put your hot filling in, that will also help it cool off a little bit quicker. Either or. And really not very many ingredients. I do have a piece of plastic wrap here that we'll use to put on top of it. Before we get started, I just want to say if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and do that. If you're enjoying this video so far, go ahead and like the video. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for always commenting. I so love hearing your stories. I love especially when you tell me things that you've made. And some of you have sent me pictures on Instagram of what you've been making. But I love seeing what you guys are making, and I love hearing about it. And as always, I love it when you share your stories with me. But thank you guys so much. And again, thank you to my patrons. Thank you to my new patrons that have recently become a patron. I can't say thank you guys enough for being here. And if you're interested in becoming a patron, the link for that is below. And if you're new to my channel and you're not aware, I have a cookbook. The link to that is below as well. So now for the recipe for today. Gluten-free, sugar-free chocolate cream pie. Cream pies are perfect for this time of year. You don't want a really heavy pie that you might have had over the holidays or a cake. And it might be too soon for a fruit to be in season. So the very first thing that you want to do is bring your ingredients to room temperature. I have 3 cups of whole milk over here that has been sitting out, so it's at room temperature. And I also have 4 eggs. We only need the yolks today, so I'll be saving my egg whites for something else. But those are also at room temperature, and then we'll get to our other ingredients as we use them. And right here, I've got 2 ounces of unsweetened chocolate. And it comes in this bar form, and then they're in little sections. And then it also comes wrapped in paper. And what I like to do, which I find is the easiest way, of course on a cutting board, but chocolate can be so messy when you're cutting it up. So I take the amount that I need and I cut it on the paper. I find that the paper is so handy to pour it into whatever you're pouring it into instead of scraping it off from the cutting board. But that's just what I do. And you don't even have to cut this up, but it really melts a lot faster when we start heating it up. And I always find it's easier to start on a corner. Some people will say a serrated knife is easier to cut chocolate. I've tried both. I've tried a flat knife like this one, and I've tried a serrated knife. And it seems to get the same results either way. And some of my chunks are pretty big, so I just run through all of the shavings that I've made just to make sure they're all kind of the same size. And of course, chocolate is always so messy when you cut it up. And even though some of it fell off of my paper, like that, but using the paper to cut it up makes it so easy to just pick it up and pour it into whatever you're doing. And if your chocolate doesn't come wrapped in a paper like this, you could just use a piece of, if your chocolate doesn't come wrapped in paper like this, you can just use a piece of parchment paper. That is so hard to say. A piece of parchment paper, not a peach. So our chocolate is ready. I'm just going to move it aside. We're not quite ready for it yet. Here's my handy napkin trick for my cutting board. The next thing that we want to do is separate our eggs. And I've got a saucepan here. It's a little bit bigger than what we need, but I find it's easier to make sure that it's all getting mixed in than to start with a smaller saucepan where it's full and then you have a harder time managing what's happening on the bottom. That's just me. So the saucepan is not for my eggs. The saucepan is actually for my 3 cups of milk. And I'm not scraping out any extra milk in there. I'm going to leave it in here and put my egg yolks in here. And I won't turn the heat on just yet. But now we can separate our eggs. And always the way that I separate them is to just pick up the yolks. And I've mentioned before, anytime I'm making a custard or cream pie, something like that where you use egg yolks, I always pick out the little white bits. You don't have to do that, but I just find it's easier. They don't really cook down, so you might get a lump of white bit in your chocolate cream pie, and that's not very pleasant. At least I don't think so. If you've made one of my pie crusts before, you'll know that I use an egg in the dough. And you don't have to use a whole egg, you could just use an egg white. So something like this, where you have egg whites, you could use 1 or 2 egg whites in your pie crust. And for this particular cream pie recipe, I do have a whipped topping that I put on top of it at the end, after it's been cooked and chilled through, which I will show you the whipped topping. But if you wanted to, you could use the egg whites and make a meringue topping for this chocolate cream pie. Some people like to do that. Yet another way to use your egg whites. So that is ready. Let me clean up a little bit here. And I don't mind if there's a little bit of extra milk in here with my egg yolks. If you've ever let your egg yolks sit out for too long, they will develop a skin. So having this little bit of extra milk in here makes it so they mix in and they don't develop a skin as easily. So that's ready. Set that aside. Clean up a little bit better. To my 3 cups of milk, I'm going to add 3/4 of a cup of honey. As always, I'll put the recipe below with the equivalents to sugar. So then I've got a 1/2 teaspoon of salt that goes in our milk mixture. A 1/3 cup of cornstarch also goes in. I usually get this stirred around really good, get that cornstarch mixed in, and then we'll add in our chocolate. And don't worry if it looks like a lumpy mess right now, it does come together. If your milk is at room temperature, it's a lot easier to dissolve the honey than if your milk was cold out of the fridge. And once this honey heats up, it will be a little bit easier to mix in. And that is combining really well. I'm going to add in my 2 ounces of chopped chocolate. So easy with the paper. And just mix that around. And you'll notice a lot of the chocolate will float to the top. And that's just what it does. But we have to stir this constantly. Because my whisk is all gunked up with honey and chocolate, I'm going to put this over here. Get another whisk. Or use your same one if you want to. But I'm going to whisk up my egg yolks and this little bit of milk that's in here. Just so it's got a head start for when we temper them. And it doesn't even have to be anything light and fluffy. Just mixed around so they don't develop a skin. And then I always put it on a hot pad. It seems easier. Once we cook our chocolate milk mixture, we will pour part of it into this while stirring, and I find that a hot pad keeps it from sliding all over the place. And then I do have 2 teaspoons of vanilla we'll stir in at the very end. But you want to go on medium heat, and we'll be stirring this constantly. And if your milk was ice cold out of the fridge, it would take longer to heat up. But this is also why we want our eggs to be at room temperature, is so when we pour in this boiling liquid, it doesn't cook the eggs faster than what we want them to be. And then you would have scrambled egg chocolate cream pie. And even though the eggs aren't in here yet, you want to continuously stir this so there's not chocolate that is burning on the bottom, and to make sure that your honey, or if you're using sugar, is getting dissolved. And this is also why you want your chocolate to be chopped in fairly small pieces so they melt faster. If you had just taken that bar of chocolate and broken it into biggish pieces, they would take longer to melt. If you want to, you can occasionally give your egg yolks a mix. You'll notice that your chocolate is kind of chunky and you feel like you'll be standing here forever, just stirring and stirring, and nothing will happen, and then all of a sudden, everything happens and comes together. And I stop whisking just to see if it is boiling. And it is boiling, so I'm going to time 1 minute while I continuously stir. And when that 1 minute is up, we're going to gradually whisk and stir half of this mixture into our egg yolks. And that's about half of my chocolate mixture. Give it a really good whisk, and right back into our chocolate in the pan. And then I scrape out the bowl, boil and stir for 1 more minute. Turn off your heat. And I like to take it all the way off the heat. Now we're going to pour in our 2 teaspoons of vanilla. At this point, if you feel like you have cooked your eggs a little bit too much and they are a little bit curdled or scrambled in there, this is where you would strain this mixture. So now that that's ready, bring over your pie shell and we'll just pour it in. Now get your plastic wrap. We're going to go directly on top of this pudding all the way up to the sides of the crust. You don't want your custard or pudding to develop a skin. And if you get big bubbles, you can work them over to the side. You want to make sure to go all the way to the edge. If you don't go all the way to where your crust is, you might develop a skin around the edges. Which, you know, there are people that do like skin on puddings and custards. And it's okay if you do have a couple of little bubbles in there. It's just fine. So now that that is ready, I like to put it back on a cooling rack. Reaching over everything. So I like to put this on a cooling rack just to help it cool off a little bit faster. You want that to cool off to room temperature and then put it in the fridge. And it needs to be in the fridge at least 4 hours. Overnight is best. If you made this very early in the morning and it had all day to set up, you could serve it that evening if you were having a party. Here we are tomorrow. My chocolate cream pie has been in the fridge all night long. I've got 1 cup of heavy cream that I've just whipped to not quite stiff peaks. So that's ready. And then I've got 4 ounces of cream cheese, 1 tablespoon of honey. And with my dirty beaters here, I'm just going to whip this really good. And then we'll start mixing in our heavy cream. And this is the topping that will go on our chocolate cream pie. And you want your cream cheese to be soft enough that it doesn't have any lumps. There's my 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And And this is exactly what we want our cream cheese to look like. Soft and smooth. So what I do first is I'm going to take a spoonful, maybe a little more, of my whipped cream and mix this in just to lighten up the cream cheese a little bit. And then I scrape the bowl down just to make sure there's not big chunks of cream cheese on the bottom, but it's already lightened up my cream cheese, honey, and vanilla mixture. So now I'm just going to fold in the rest of my whipped cream, a little bit at a time. You could beat it all in with the beaters if you wanted to, but sometimes I find it yields a stiffer topping than what I'm looking for. That's the last of my whipped cream. And that looks really good. If you had beaten this with your beaters and it was a lot stiffer than this, you could put this mixture in a piping bag to decorate the top of your chocolate cream pie. So here is my pie that has been chilling all night in the fridge. I'll just very carefully remove the plastic wrap. It looks really good. If I had done a better job of pressing out my bubbles, they wouldn't have the little pock marks. If you wanted to, again, if you had your topping in a piping bag, you could pipe little decorative designs all the way around, put on some shaved chocolate if you wanted to, chocolate sprinkles, something like that, or you could take this entire topping and put it on the top of your pie. This topping holds up so well in the fridge. If you have whipped cream that you have whipped and then you're storing leftovers in the fridge, sometimes after a day or two it gets a little weepy, and then you just re-whip it and it's fine. Because the cream cheese is in here, it really stabilizes the heavy cream and your topping doesn't get weepy. Although I don't normally store my pies with a whipped topping on top. Unless you're going to serve all of it that day, then I will put the entire thing on top. So let's cut into it and see what we've got. First one's always the hardest to get out. But look at that. This pie really holds a slice so well. Let's turn this around so you can see. So now let's give ourselves a little dollop here of our whipped topping. It holds a slice so well, but it's still a soft cream pie. If you like chocolate, this is the pie for you. It's a really nice chocolate flavor, perfect texture. The whipped topping, it just has a tablespoon of honey, so it's not super sweet, and the pie itself is not super sweet. It's just the perfect amount of sweet for a chocolate cream pie. So good. And my crust is nice and thin. Of course, if you like a thicker crust, roll your crust a little bit thicker, but just perfect and not soggy at all. A pie like this is perfect for a spring Sunday dinner dessert. Nice and light, not too heavy, and just the right amount of sweet. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.